All right, yes. Are you recording yet?
We are recording now, so welcome to Trimester 2, Film Animation History and Theory. So, what I want to do is essentially, like all week ones, just give you a little bit of an overview of how it's all going to go, the whole subject, and what we're wanting to achieve. A bit of a breakdown of weeks 1 through to 12. I think it's important that we give you an introduction to the brief, particularly the first brief, and really just sort of set things up. The subject matter is probably going to be kind of on the light side, just as we break you in first week. We don't want to sort of crush you all in the first instance. So I've got a lot of the stuff from the learning outcome from the unit outlines, and it's just really good to draw your attention to it because I sort of imagine most people don't really kind of look at the unit outlines too much. But the whole purpose of this unit essentially is to give you a bit of an overview of the whole history of animation. It just gives you really great historical context, and I always feel that history is really important to understand them now and understand how we're going to get to where everything's headed. I find it really useful. I mean, as much as I enjoy history, I think it's just really important to have a sort of an understanding of how we got to where we are, and to understand how we go into the next phase. And I suppose, I don't know, Tony and I would be sort of sniggering, thinking we've seen actually quite a bit of history of animation. We started our journey with pencils, and even you lot, when I showed you my old Wacom, you laughed and thought it was a little bit decrepit. So I had no idea it was that bad. Feel free to leap in, contribute. It's always good to have some chit chat going on as well. So it's always good to look at the early learning outcomes, because that actually sets the roadmap for what we're trying to do and when we do our assessment. So it's really good to have all of that laid out right in the first instance. And this is essentially what we come back to when we're building the whole subject, and we're laying out the rubrics and the assessments, and also the topics included. I won't bother reading them out because you can clearly see them there, and you've got access to the unit outlines when you get into Canvas as well. But I think it's just important just to sort of show you where we're going. So we're just going to talk about experimental animation techniques, various important studios that have made significant contributions, animators and their films, various aesthetics of teams, a little bit of creative diversity, some cultural stuff, where sort of animation has been important in creating propaganda for various reasons. Maybe some subversive and banned animation. I think most of my animation's been banned, actually.
Maybe a different reason, Simon.
We talk about some European, Asian, and also I'd like to look at some Australian animation during the course of the 12 weeks as well. So all of these learning outcomes get boiled down into the how we assess. So we've got, again, 3 assessments, and as per usual, they start off nice and soft, a nice little soft landing, and they just get a little bit more meatier as we progress through the trimester. One thing we've been able to do is stagger the assessments a little bit more. So I'll go into that in a second, actually. So right, okay. So we're going to have assessments in as you remember from last trimester, every assessment landed in weeks 6, 9, and 12, and that created some nasty little clusters for you all, and probably didn't do much for your anxiety levels or ours. So the one thing that I was able to do over the break was go into the Learning and Teaching Committee and get that changed. So now we've got weeks 3, 7, and 11, just to create a little bit more space around assessments. And you can see the associated weightings there. So like I said, you've got a nice soft landing, because in week 3, you're really just creating a bit of a, I guess, a bit of a framework for the more in-depth detail of stuff. So it's nice. It's going to be nice and easy for you. Okay, so the first assessment due week 3 is I want you to produce a timeline of the history of animation. So I really want you to think about significant moments and events throughout animation, and you're all going to find different things that interest you and pique your interest, hopefully. So there isn't one definitive timeline. Hopefully you're going to find different stuff, so we'll be able to compare those as well, which would be really great. So and you can approach this in lots of different ways. Up until now, you've been writing really fairly straight essays for me. So one of the things I've really wanted to put into this is that whilst it says 1,000 to 1,500 words, really and truly, I'm not going to do a word count on that. I know what sort of a 1,000-word or a 2,000-word essay looks like. I sort of can just sort of instinctively tell, and I don't get into counting the words in things. If things are a bit light, then I can sort of go back and go and mark it accordingly. And likewise, if you've got a little bit too verbose, I can use that as some of your feedback. But for me, it's more about quality of work rather than measuring an assignment by how many words that are in it. And so that's just how I approach things. And every lecturer will tackle things differently. And I won't ever go in and tell any lecturer that they need, how they need to do it. Sort of trust them to use their excellent judgment on that. The thing is, we all know that you're here to become animators and modelers and visual effects artists. We know that you're not here necessarily to be, great essay writers. So, like I said to you last trimester, I really want you to focus in on the practical work that you're doing with CG Spectrum. I think that's really important. But obviously, you do need to get this assignment done and put some quality into it. But I don't want to sort of crush you with high sort of academic expectations. So absolutely make it visual. Use images, graphics, any kind of visual elements that you might think. So it doesn't have to be this chunky essay style. Does that make sense?
Can we actually make a video?
Make a video.
Or like a PowerPoint presentation, or something like that.
Yeah, you could make a presentation for sure. Yeah, if you wanted to. Yeah, look, I'm really open to this sort of stuff. So, but don't get bogged down in and distracted by stuff, though, Sarah. Don't go off on kind of crazy tangents. You're not going to make Ben-Hur.
Ever. I never have crazy tangents.
So Simon,
yeah.
So what would be a good ratio between images and words, like per page?
A good ratio. I haven't really thought about it in those terms.
I don't know if I can throw something in here, Simon. But I would say if it looks cramped and clunky, it probably is. So if it's easy on the eye from your perspective, it's probably going to be easy on the eye for us. And as long as the images are all, cited in your bibliography and you're saying where you got them from, you can use any images that you like. So it's really up to you. And as visual people, this is another challenge, is to create something that's visually appealing, that could be really dry and uninteresting. That you're adding something different to it. You're adding another visual level to it. So I'd use your own judgment on that, actually. But I wouldn't say a picture is 1,000 words, so I wouldn't give Simon 1.5 pictures.
Mate.
Use your judgment.
You can see why we hired him. It's just gold, isn't it?
I don't want to put ideas in here.
Fantastic. Yeah. Absolutely. We're ultimately, you're in the communication game, and you need to use your judgment as, are you communicating this? And I would say a good yardstick that I would always say is, at this level, you're giving a good overview, and try showing it to a family member, and if they can look at it and go, oh, right, okay, so there was this key moment at the start of the timeline that really set the ball rolling, and there were some technological changes, there was some maybe there were some socio-political kind of movements or changes that affected the development of the history of animation. And it should sort of kind of make sense how one thing led to another. So there's key moments, and that needs to all kind of make sense. And it needs to make sense to you, because that's what this is about. You're going to be working in animation, and you need to know what all this stuff means. I ran into an old mate of Tony's and I last night, who's an animation studio owner, actually. And I said, I was telling him about this assignment, and he just sort of instinctively just rattled off a whole bunch of stuff. He went, oh yeah, you're going to tell them about Winsor Mackay and Gertie the dinosaur and all that. You just need to know that stuff. It's really important. You need to know your industry. It's not just about knowing, which bloody version of Maya you're using. It's about knowing the full gamut. So I think it's really important. Cool. So does that make sense to you guys? If you got any questions, throw them in the chat. We'll pick it up at the end too.
Sounds good. Thanks, Simon.
Cool. Thanks, Leon. Excellent question. Okay. And I won't go into too much detail about the other assessments, because we'll touch upon those close to the time. If we talk about it too much now, you forget anyway. But essentially, the second task is to investigate the work of a specific studio or a filmmaker or an animator or a VFX artist, if VFX is where your interest lies, and look at the significant contribution to the development of filmmaking that they've made. Maybe discuss projects, techniques, and processes that are relevant. And this would be an investigation into a period of output rather than a specific film project. Again, make it visual, and make it interesting. Again, I'm not looking at a word count, but the 2,000 words is a bit of a clue. That 2,000 words thing really comes from Texa. So they're saying to us, they tend to think in words, but they don't get that we're visual people. But I think it just gives an indication of the weight of this, and this is 40% of your overall mark. So your timelines during week 3. So you can actually really knock that out pretty quickly. This is when it gets a little bit chunkier, and so yeah, the focus is in on maybe a specific studio. You might say you might really like the work of Miyazaki Hayao, Studio Ghibli, and so that you can really, rather than just talking about, Totoro, you might look at their whole body of work and why it was important, and discuss what influences it had.
What classes is history? Like, can it be a studio that's still going now? Like, can you look into the history of, see how Weta Digital started and stuff?
Yeah, you could do. Yeah, totally.
Does George Lucas count?
Who?
George
Eileen?
Lucas.
Never heard of him.
What? Yes, you have. Stop it. Doing him.
He played for Arsenal. Of course I've heard of him. Okay, assessment 3, due week 11. So investigate a specific film project. So this is different from the second assignment. So the second assignment's sort of kind of a little bit broader. This is talking about a specific film project within the context of history and the development of the moving image. So this might include significant technology or creative advancements in filmmaking. For example, you might want to say, oh, well, how did color affect the animation industry? Or how did maybe some technical advancements such as optical printing or multi-plane rostrum cameras, or it might be something significant with CG or 3D animation. I don't know, it could be anything that's kind of piqued your interest along the way. Hopefully, and ideally, this is different from the work discussed in assessment 2. So it's just a different focus, yeah. And
Could that be, say, about The Wall, Pink Floyd, the movie?
Yeah,
For instance.
Totally.
Ralph Steadman, top darts.
Yeah. Fancy Sarah picking out a Pink Floyd film.
Good on you.
Yes, honestly.
Gets a bit of prog rock into everything.
I can't help it, I'm a Ziplinist.
This is when I name drop. I remember working at Richard Williams' studio, and this guy knocked on the door one night, and he kind of walked in. I remember he had this really cool jacket on, and so I was showing him around the studio, and we were talking about stuff. And I said, "Oh, what are you up to? You know, what do you do?" And he says, "Oh, I make music, and I'm doing the music for the film." And I went, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And I said, "Well, it was a Friday night. There was no one around." And I said, "Oh, anyway." So we chatted away. Anyway, he left after about an hour. And one of the guys I worked with put his head out of his cubicle and said, "How do you know Roger Waters?" I went, "I'm an old punk."
What?
If it was Joe Strummer, I would have lost my shit. But I just went, "Who?" He went,
Yeah, and you were hanging out with Roger Waters and you didn't even know.
and he said, "Oh,
That's an offence, Simon.
I got plenty more names to drop. I don't want to do them all now." Okay, assessments. The assessment rubric. I've had quite a few one-on-ones with everyone last week, and basically, when all of the results came in and we went to the moderation committee, I had to have a big please explain why everyone got a high distinction for everything. And I told them that you're all geniuses.
Brilliant.
I didn't get a high distinction for everything.
I didn't get a high distinction. Oh, no, I didn't. I don't think
I only got one high distinction.
Maybe I got one. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
So you don't even remember. You've forgotten it already. Basically, the grades overall were really clustered to the far right of this rubric. So there's a reason why they're called high distinctions, is because they really are as rare as hen's teeth. It's great when you get them, and you should absolutely aim for them and try and work out how you're going to get them. But they've kind of become the default. This is based on spending a bit of time in education. That look, I remember in my last job, I remember marking this groups work, and they were really great students, and we all get along really well, and they did some lovely work. And then I'd been marking over the weekend and released the results, and I walked in to the next class, and it was a bit frosty. And I went, "What's going on? I thought we were all friends." And I went, "What? We're not very happy with our grades." I mean, what do you mean you're not very happy with your grades? I said, "Well, we all got credits." I said, "Yeah, no, I was really pleased with it. You know, if you look at the wording, credit is a good thing." And they went, no, they were fully expecting to be, you know, in the sort of high distinction range. And I went, for me, I've always think if a student is getting credits, that's actually really good. I'm really happy with that. That's kind of like you're doing everything. Look at the language. Moves beyond the minimum standard with regard to blah, 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 demonstrates good knowledge and blah, blah, blah. You know, that's a really good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. So, yeah, and I'll be honest, it's something I've talked to the CG Spectrum guys about. They're not used to marking. So it's kind of nice to just say to everyone, hey, have a high distinction. It's great. It's easy, you know, you're not upsetting anyone. So there needs to be a little bit more rigorous kind of reasons why you get high distinctions. So, you know what, the credit distinction sort of threshold, I feel, is a bit of a sweet spot. Tony, have you got any thoughts on this?
No, I would totally agree. And as you mentioned before, it's sort of in the language. So if you get a credit, it means you're a credit to yourself. And if you get a distinction, it means that you've distinguished yourself academically. So it's really in the language as well. And then if you want to be highly distinguished, that's where the high distinction is. And usually the high distinction would be someone that brings something extra that's almost unexpected to the marker, and you're going, oh wow, this person has absolutely, you know, totally blown me away. And look, that's not going to happen every time. And I understand if you get a high distinction for your first assessment, the natural thing is to think, well, you know, I'm on a roll here, I'm going to get one for every assessment, but it just doesn't work that way. And the same thing happened to me when I was doing my master's. I got upset with a credit, you know, it's just the way it goes. And as Simon said, there's also the moderation process as well. So the college will look at the overall marks and go, well, there is a bit of a skew here. We need to, due to academic rigor and for compliance and things like that, you have to have a reasonable spread of grades. So don't take it personally. When you go for a job, no one's going to be looking at what you've got for individual subjects. It's all going to be on your folio and your presentation, and how you can impress people with your history of animation knowledge and that sort of thing. Absolutely. And the moderation meeting that went for a whole day is one of the most fascinating days I've ever spent in academia, I've got to say. Every head of department was present, and literally the results of every single student that trimester came up on the screen, and we saw the spread of results, and we all had to, you know, there's people doing, you know, music performance grades. I didn't even see the work, but I saw the grades, and it's like, what does everyone think? I was like, well, I suppose all right. But when this came up, and literally just everyone looked at me and went, yeah, and I was fully expecting them to actually, they run an algorithm across all the grades and bring them down, and I was fully expecting that, and that didn't happen. But the dean said to me, we need to talk. So, yeah. Deathly silent. How do you feel about that? Are you guys cool with that? I'm just managing.
For the high distinctions that we have already then.
Sorry?
Be very grateful for the high distinctions that we have already then.
Do you know
That's
what?
a good way of
I mean, I am. I'm totally
genuinely, I thought the work was really good. You did everything that I'd asked for. You know, you'd definitely moved beyond minimum standards. You know, you were absolutely in that really good sweet spot. I couldn't have wanted more. You did great. So
I didn't. My last two essays were so bad.
Yeah,
I think that, like, remember at the start of the term or the trimester, sorry, Simon, how I got a really bad grade in critical thinking and I was like super upset?
Yep.
Yeah, like I think after we had that talk about it, I stopped focusing more on the grade and like started focusing more on the actual what I'm learning from the assignment. And it
Totally.
That's
was
great.
way better mindset to be in.
Totally. It's all about the learning and what just enjoy the learning. Like learning stuff's great. So yeah, cool. All right. So this is my caveat is this is the general plan. So, you can see the assessments through there. I've got to tell you about sensor state and all about that. And I've just scattered some areas that I really think are important to talk about, like rubber hose animation and the importance of Steamboat Willie and what that meant. And, this started the Disney studio. And we talk about the golden age of animation. Everyone sort of thinks about this golden age of animation and, things like, visual effects and CG and 3D milestones. And I want to get into, I always drink carbonated water in my lectures. I don't know why. And then I realize I can't talk. Excuse me. I think title sequences are a really important part of this industry that you're getting into. And it's something that we don't really talk about much. Stop frame animation, things like, different technical milestones, this divide between film, TV, animation. So we sort of think about Snow White as being the first feature film, and then then going to something like The Simpsons, which has been this long-running TV thing. They're different beasts, and it's really good to think about that. I thought it might be an opportunity, without kind of wanting to talk about my own projects too much, but I really want to tell you about this Richard Williams guy and why he's regarded as really important. And I might throw a bit of Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki in there as well. And when I was referring to the unit outline, one of the things that Texo has put in there is they want us to talk about Australian animation, so an experimental animation. So experimental animation was really prevalent in various places in Europe and Canada of all places. So yeah, that's the general plan. And I reserve the right, if I suddenly realize I've forgotten something or I suddenly get excited and want to talk about something in animation, I'll throw that in there as well. So this is the class schedule. As you know, you're all in stage 2. So you've got Monday nights with me, Tuesday nights with Tony. Then physical animation with Mark is on Wednesday instead of Thursday. And the modeling subject is with Jeremy on a Thursday instead of Wednesday. You can see they've swapped around. Cool. And all of this stuff in the gray, this is literally just my working document. It really is literally how I'm planning out the course. So things might not land exactly as I've stated there because the availability of lecturers and whatnot. So and also you might turn around and say to us, we really want to study on Friday nights. Hope you don't, but you might do. I know, Tanya, I saw that look. You went, Friday nights? On wine night? What are you thinking?
I'm really excited to do screenwriting. That'll be cool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That'd be super cool, I reckon. Good stuff.
Yeah, and see, these are all the things that Tony and I will sort of start thrashing out between us and seeing, who wants to do which subjects. So yeah, absolutely. We'll
story is king, as they say.
Fully.
Absolutely.
I think it was real weird. I've never been excited for school, and we're all in the group chat this afternoon like, oh, I'm so excited. Like, only 1 hour and a half to go.
We were counting down the minutes. Oh my God, we're such nerds.
That's really good to hear.
That's cool. See, you're such a good group. You're all really warmed up. I took Tony into orientation the other night, and it was nobody spoke. No one turned their cameras on. I was just saying to him, it's all right. The group you're teaching, Tony, they're really good.
Mm. It'll be fun.
Cool. And this is how your assessments are staggered in a sort of an infographic. So as you see, rather than sort of hitting a wall of assessments in week 6, we've staggered them through. And so that's what I'm saying, you know, for me, film animation, week 3, because it's in week 3, you know, you've only had a little time to work on it. So it's weighted in that way that it's only 20%. It's really and truly, you know, it's only meant to be a light assessment. So when I just use what Sarah was saying about, you know, making a short film, I was going to go, yeah, nah.
Maybe for the last one, not the first little one.
Okay, right. You started to worry me. I went, because you always have really bold, brave ideas, which are fantastic, and I never want to crush them, but yeah,
I know.
I do want to crush them.
They need to be not crushed, but at least deflated a little bit sometimes.
It's like you do with children. You say, come away from the traffic, come away from the edge there, it's dangerous. So
No,
it's
no
right.
fun in that.
All right, let's get into the bones of it then. So the thing I do want to apologise is I got a little bit excited when we were doing the last subjects, the VFX pipeline, that I spent a bit of time going into the history of things, and then I realised that I'd actually sort of started to blur the lines between the two subjects. So there is a little bit of repeat, but and I did say we're going to a little bit more detail. So, you know, that idea that human beings have always been storytellers, and the storyteller in the community has always held a really important role. You know, you can imagine in, you know, primitive societies, sitting around a fire, and, you know, the person that had a good yarn would always be valued in society. You know, that sort of idea of the traveling storyteller and the craft of the storyteller. So it's always been around, and I've just sort of picked a couple of instances where storytelling was quite important. So this is the Trajan column in Rome, and, you know, it's if you look at the detail on it, there's this incredible carving. I mean, can you imagine trying to make something like this without any kind of technology? So the whole thing reads like this storyboard, or this whole. It's like a feature film that just spirals up this column, and it's absolutely massive. And right at the top, you've got the Emperor Trajan, who is this Roman emperor. He came out of the military, and, you know, he was very much sort of influential in the sort of the kind of the military expansion of the Roman Empire. And, you know, he would go off and have these amazing adventures, and and basically conquering various territories. And he sort of came back, and, you know, needed to tell the story, and, you know, and explain what had happened. And, you know, this is a phenomenal piece of work, really important. And so I found this illustration of what it would have looked like in its day. It would have been coloured, so it was obviously, you know, pretty old, so all the colouring has washed off it. And people would be gathering around it, you know, and looking at it and discussing all of those stories. So it was a really, you know, it was really just this epic tale of what had occurred. So storytelling, massively important. Then, you know, I think we need to think about, you know, Aboriginal First Nations people. You know, they're the oldest living culture on the planet, 65,000 years and counting. You know, you can, you know, it's often, when I used to teach graphic design, we referred to Aboriginal people as the world's first graphic designers, or the world's first sort of visual storytellers. And so there's lots and lots of evidence of that storytelling. And, you know, clearly it was really, really important to them, because they did a lot of it. And they weren't just sort of randomly sort of, you know, making their caves and campsites looking pretty. You know, this stuff had real power to it. So it was really important. So, you know, I thought it's important to, I mean, there's so many areas of storytelling we could have got into and picked. Another one I always like to think about is the Bayeux Tapestry, which is, you know, depicts the story of the Norman conquest of England, 1066. And this thing is, you know, 70 meters long, and it's a little bit like the Trajan column, because it's sort of it does this sequential storyboard thing. And I actually found this brilliant little YouTube clip that you should go and watch if you're that way inclined, and it just takes you through the whole of the Bayeux Tapestry in a way that I've never seen before. And they actually animate bits and pieces of it in this sort of kind of kooky way, which is kind of cool. But it talks about the whole storytelling aspect to it, and it takes you all to a point where, you know, old King Harold gets the arrow in the eye, and it's just a fantastic bit of narrative storytelling. So it's important. We're going to talk about it. So also, there's been other cultures that have used other forms of storytelling. Up until now, we've seen, you know, the Bayeux Tapestry and rock art, and, you know, stuff like the Trajan columns, and there's lots of other narrative art. But shadow plays, I think, are probably one of the oldest examples of linear narrative that is probably closer to cinema than some of the other visual art. So things like magic lanterns and Indonesian stuff. So, you know, this has been around since I think my research was that it was about, you know, sort of about the 1st century, probably even older. We just don't know. You know, and they essentially, shadow theatre evolved into, you know, projected slides and ultimately cinematography. So essentially, it's that premise that you've got a story, and you've obviously got an audience and a narrative, and they're using light and images, and it's all projected onto a screen. So there's lots of parallels between filmmaking and shadow puppets. And also, the other thing that's important to mention is that they, you know, were starting to bring in other devices such as music and voice. The persistence of vision. So that's ultimately where we're headed. And how does filmmaking work? The persistence of vision refers to this optical illusion that occurs when you have when visual perception of an object does not cease for some time, long after the rays of light have ceased to enter the light. Very long-winded way of saying that when you see something, it's that thing of when you wave your hand in front of your face and you get that blurry thing, because you're getting that after image. You're getting sort of moments after the thing has passed. Your eye is still perceiving it. So essentially, it's the eye is quicker than the brain. And, you know, without this phenomenon, there just wouldn't be story. There just wouldn't be filmmaking. It just wouldn't work. You know, without this idea that the brain is getting this after image. The image I've used there is I always think of this as being that thing of, when you use a sparkler and you're waving it around in the air. This is Picasso, and he did these beautiful series of drawings, light drawings, and it's not exactly right. I'm tricking it a little bit, because what they actually did there was he would have had a camera with the shutter open, and he would have drawn this in the air in the total dark, and then they would have used a quick flashlight to capture him static. But it's essentially trying to illustrate that point of what's kind of happening with the persistence of vision, that there's this, your eye is like that open shutter where it's all kind of going in and being traced onto the brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's still real popular in photography as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great technique, but it's, like I said, it's not exactly, if you're going to be technical about, the persistence of vision. I just thought it was just a nice illustration. I had lots of other stuff of people doing stuff with sparklers and whatnot.
Is it kind of like when you look at a light, for example, and then when you look away, you can kind of still see the light,
Absolutely.
I guess?
That's exactly right. That's exactly what's happening.
Okay, cool.
But it's happening so fast that even this stuff here, these screens. I mean, the only reason you see me waving my arms around is because the screens are just tracing really fast, and it's showing you sort of sequential images which your brain kind of pieces together. So it's a fascinating thing, this idea of persistence of vision. And if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have any kind of filmmaking. Any thoughts, Tone? I'm just keen to know what you know about stuff.
No, totally agree with you. It basically means that you're seeing smooth action rather than a series of, individual images that sort of have a beginning and an end. So your eye and your brain work together to smooth it all together, and then you get this smooth motion. So there's that the idea of continuity. So that's bang on, totally.
And it's true that the more we'll get into the sort of frame rates in a second, but the quicker the frame rates, the smoother it looks. So it's the visual phenomenon that a series of individual still pictures viewed in rapid succession create the illusion of movement. So this is essentially the concept that we call the persistence of vision. It was first, people have known about it for centuries, and I found some evidence that that people had been playing with optical toys going way back into medieval times, because of course they would have had paper, absolutely, early scribes would have got books and flicked them, and they would have gone, oh, look at this movie. They would have known about it, but no one really kind of explored it. There's some examples of people making this is a thaumatrope, but there's examples where people have found really early versions of this on little pieces of clay, where they've literally scratched something in, and they think that that's what they were doing. They're not too sure. But anyway, so it wasn't just 1824. That's not that long ago. Not when you're as old as Tony and I. I remember working with.
That's where we met.
Peter Marc Roget. This was our first film. We called it The Bird in the Cage.
I'm laughing too hard. You're crazy.
But so essentially that was you've got to sort of make a moment in time when people first coin a concept, and these guys would have been scientists, and they would have said, "Oh, I've got this theory, and it's cool. We're going to call it the blah 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 persistence of vision. Oh, very good. And I'm going to call it the thaumatrope. Yes, very good." And so so I've got this kind of cool video if you want to know a little bit more about how and why the persistence of vision works. So it's the ability of the brain to interpret a fast succession of still images as a moving image. So it's sort of, if it didn't happen, all you would see is like image, 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 and you go, oh, they're a little bit similar, but kind of a bit different. But no, your brain just sees that motion. In the early days of the motion picture production, they were trying to work out what would be the ideal frame rate, and they settled upon 16 frames per second. Initially, they sort of tried 10 frames per second, and I thought, yeah, it sort of works, but it's still a bit jerky. And they just sort of kept on experimenting. They got to 16 frames per second. They went, yeah, that kind of works. So all of those early black and white films, those Chaplin films, and around those films that were made in the sort of the earlier part of last century, sort of about 1918 onwards, or especially all that footage you see of the First World War, and you can see it's got this particularly juttery thing to it. I'll tell you something I've discovered today, and I hadn't realised, but I used to sort of see that and go, oh, why is it playing at the wrong speed? I discovered something today in my research that. Yes, I know this is a terrible, terrible, terrible image, and blackface is never right. But we have moved on from this. The reason this is here is because there's a reason for this. Tony's sort of
no, I'm waiting.
Tony's thinking, he's got a lot of paperwork on this one. As we all know, The Jazz Singer was the first motion picture with syncopated sound, synchronized sound. So I've used that as an illustration for when sound and moving pictures came together. So they realized that to make sound work, they needed to play films at 24 frames per second. Up until then, it was 16 frames per second. So that when you see all of those old footage, just all those World War I footage, they're kind of moving really fast. Yeah.
Yes.
I hadn't realised the reason being was because they were originally meant to be at 16 frames per second. They were playing them at 24 frames, so they sped them up, and that wasn't the speed you were meant to see them. And how you see all of that reconstructed old footage where they've coloured it and they've slowed it down, and it looks really weird. So you look at all these images, you look at all these young men going off to war and all of that Anzac footage, and you're disconnected from it because it looks like it's in the past, because it's got that rapid frame rate that it always has, and it always looks really weird. It's because of that. It's because it's been played too fast. But when they've reconstructed it, they've essentially slowed it down to the right frame rate. They've digitally coloured it, but they do this really clever thing where they basically in between the frames to take out the juddering, and all of a sudden it looks really contemporary. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen that stuff when they've recreated it, and you go, oh my god, that feels like it was shot, yesterday. It feels real. You don't feel disconnected from it in a sort of a time way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen bits and pieces of them.
Anyway, I found that interesting. That I had no idea that. I obviously realised they were playing it too fast, but I didn't know why they were playing it. I just thought, wow, they've just shot it really, on dodgy equipment. So that is why we've got Al Johnson in blackface, which we know is never cool. And so optical toys. So from the thaumatrope, which was invented 1825 as a sort of a demonstration of a phenomenon. It was just almost like a toy. There was this spate of different kinds of toys. Some of them are completely impossible to pronounce, like the phanatoscope. I don't even know what that is actually. The zoetrope is essentially this cylindrical thing, And have you guys seen the Toy Story Zoetrope?
Yes, I love it. I feel like
Oh,
you
cool.
put the link in one of our slideshows.
Yes, I think that's this link from memory. It's
I showed everyone.
Have you seen that, Tone?
No, I don't think I have.
It's
I'll check that out.
Check out the
Invest.
Yeah,
I will.
it's really good. I think it's that link there, because these are taken from my old lectures from before. So essentially, these were just toys. They were just Victorian oddities that they just like. Oh well, they weren't really telling any story. Yes, they could study movement, and that was really good, but they weren't really telling any kind of narrative, because it's just this, it's just cycles, sort of run cycles and walk cycles and things like that. Which got me to kind of thinking. I've had this sort of theory about, like VR. Everyone's sort of talking about VR. We've got a whole bunch of VR equipment arrived on campus the other day, and we've got a VR lecturer that's coming to do some stuff with some of the subjects, and it's like when now.
Yay.
But you've got to come on campus.
That's not fair. Can they do it online too?
Simon, I googled what a phenakistoscope is.
Virtual reality. What was that? Sorry, Brittany?
I googled what a phenakistoscope is. However you say that.
Good pronunciation.
That was a perfect pronunciation.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do try. When you're like, wait, do you know what it is?
I don't actually.
No, do tell.
Okay. So it's like, I don't really know how to explain it. When you see the best example I can give is dancers from above, and you've got they're sort of on tiers, 3 platforms, and they're all in a circle. I don't know how to explain this. And they're kind of all doing moves with their legs and arms and stuff, and it kind of just gives the illusion of them all moving in different directions, I guess you could say.
It's on a flat piece of paper.
Was it spinning around, Brittany?
Yes.
Yes. I think recently a contemporary artist did something.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Awesome.
Cool. But anyway, I just started riffing on.
Sorry, Simon.
This side. No, it's good. I like it.
That actually used to be my Facebook profile image.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, I love that image. I just saw it and went, I want that. I want to be that guy.
I was trying to find a really dodgy image of someone with a VR headset, and they look kind of ridiculous. And I think in a few years' time, we're going to look at those VR headsets and go, "What? How ridiculous was that?" These days, we've got these
There's already some that are just like goggles, they're like swimming goggles, or they're nothing like the big boxy things, but they're very expensive.
Yeah.
But there are out there. Soon they'll just be glass.
Yeah, that's right. They'll just be like a normal glass.
And it'll be AR, not VR.
And we're just going to have the operation where we'll just be.
Oh, just be in our eyes, yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is these toys, these things, they were just optical toys. They were just amusements. They didn't really tell any kind of narrative. And it's kind of like VR at the moment. All the VR stuff is fun. You kind of go, oh yeah, like games and stuff like that. But it, apart from some of the ArchiViz stuff, which is kind of cool, there's not a lot of narrative going on with them yet, I don't think. But I think we're a moment away from it, and there's some really amazing stuff coming in. Bailey's here.
Hey guys.
Hey Bailey.
Hello.
Sorry, I didn't want to distract you.
I screamed.
I saw the little chats coming up, so I was fascinated.
That's good. You didn't want to distract me? I'm distracted.
I have failed.
So Bailey, I remember the chat when I was doing the history of VFX, and someone said he's going to blow all his material for next trimester. Yeah, I've blown all my material for next trimester. So there's a little bit of repeating.
Brilliant.
So, you can't study animation without knowing about Edward Muybridge and his photographic work. And he was really just he wasn't interested in creating movies, because, the movies hadn't been invented then. He was literally interested in animal motion. And there were a number of people at the time that were trying to, photography was still quite new. And they were literally trying to work out how certain animals moved. This is at a point when people drew horses, that they used to draw all their legs out straight, and they couldn't kind of work out. There wasn't a good way of working out what was going on at that sort of speed. So literally his stuff was all about trying to explore how things moved, because people weren't quite sure. And they didn't even have a movie camera. They used to just set up a succession of cameras along a track, so that the animal just sort of would just hit all these tripwires, and it would just sort of take photographs, like bang, bang, bang. And the important thing is that the photography then was all silver plate photography, so it was rigid. So it wasn't like you could even have the possibility of exploring persistence of vision, because there was no way to create a flip book. It was just really, really static. But they could lay them out in these little sheets and kind of go, oh, look, I can sort of see. And it was literally a scientific experiment, or a scientific exploration, rather than anything to do with filmmaking, because there was just literally no film camera. So there was another development. So it's all these little incremental developments. So the first public screening of a film was by the Lumiere brothers, and there was some significant little inventions or developments that allowed that to happen. They don't sound that big. All of a sudden, instead of Muybridge taking still photographs on rigid metal plates, they found ways to make photographic films, celluloid. So they were able to, so that was important, so that you could bend it around a roll. Sounds like a small thing, but it was really important. And then they thought, well, how do we drag these through a projector? Oh, well, perforated film sprockets. And then they needed to invent and develop, motion cameras, and then projectors. So there was all these little incremental things, and if any one of those things wasn't in place, no cinema. So anyway, they sort of developed those in the 1890s. You can go along and watch all of their greatest hits there, the Lumiere brothers. This is a lithograph of a film poster of one of their first films. So they were the first people to screen a public screening to a paying audience. It was a fascinating film, a good bit of comedy where it's that classic standing on the hose pipe trick of, you can imagine the gardener who can't work out why water's stopped coming out of his hose. Of course, he looks down the end of it, and the naughty boy takes his foot off and squirts him in the face. Brilliant. That's the whole film. Amazing. But if you think about it, it's the first time people are kind of using film to tell a kind of a crazy little story. Cool. And then, of course, we've got Georges Millet, and he was, as we know, we think of him as being the sort of the father of modern visual effects, because he was starting to use, you know, primitive animation. He was starting to, you know, use, you know, various techniques and pushing the medium. He was starting to do things like time lapse or multiple exposures, or, you know, stopping the camera, doing, you know, this sort of kind of crazy trick photography. He was also one of the first filmmakers to actually use storyboards, and he's sort of known for his. He did lots of these sort of fantasy stuff, this sort of Jules Verne stuff of people sort of going and having these crazy adventures, like, you know, the sort of journey to the trip to the moon and the Impossible Voyage. So, you know, really important stuff, and really pushed the medium. And I think he made about 500 films, and was, you know, kind of, that's why he was so important, because he was, you know, really kind of pushing the medium. And interesting enough, he didn't even set out to be a filmmaker or anything. Actually, he was actually came from a family of bootmakers, and his family fortune was made from making shoes. And it was when his father sort of retired and died and sort of handed him the business, he was like, oh crap, you know, I've got to go make boots. And it actually wanted to make theatre, so he ended up going to various theatres. He went along and saw the Lumiere brothers and thought, wow, this is amazing. You know, this is, you know, he really liked the idea of putting on stage shows and kind of being a bit of an illusionist and trying these interesting things. And he saw filmmaking as really just another way of creating an illusion for an audience. So that was his whole thing. He certainly didn't sort of, you know, when he was a small boy at school and they say, hey, George, what do you want to be? And he goes, oh, I thought about being the father of visual effects in filmmaking. They go, don't be silly. Go and make some more boots, you silly man. So that's how it all kind of happened. However, he wasn't the first. I find this is kind of interesting that before Georges Méliès, there was this camera operator, Alfred Clark, and he sort of realised that there was this kind of flaw or fault in the cameras, where sometimes they would jam, because, you know, the film would be going through the camera and it would just jam for a second and then start again, and it gave this illusion that people would just vanish or fly across the screen. And I went, oh God, that classic thing of, you know, when there's a happy accident or when there's a mistake, and you go, oh, actually, we can actually use that. And so he put this to good use when he did this thing of, you know, I think it's quite bizarre. This first thing is the beheading of the Mary Queen of Scots, when they've, you know, got this dummy and they sort of, you know, put the real model, you know, the real actress there, and she's there and they're about to take her head off, and they go, quickly, stop the camera, everyone stay still, and they move her out the way and they put the dummy in the way and they, okay, go, and they swing the thing down, and it's, oh my God, they've chopped the head off. And you've got to think, you know, back in 1895, that would have been horrendous. That would have been like, people would have been like screaming in the theatre. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, that's kind of important moment in filmmaking. There we have it. What's the time now? How long have I been speaking for? An hour and a quarter. So that's where I wanted to take you. Literally just a bit of a soft landing, give you a bit of an understanding of the brief, the whole subject, and cover the persistence of vision and get us up to that point where we actually have this thing called cinema. There we have it. Hey, Bailey, I need to introduce you to Tony.
Hi, Bailey.
Has he just wandered off?
G'day.
Where is he?
My family's like loud as, so I told him to be quiet.
What was that? Sorry, mate.
G'day. My family's really loud, so I just told them to be quiet.
Are they all sitting around your computer?
Nah, they're just off to the side. They were making some good laughs. So yeah. Anyway, g'day Tony. How's it going?
Nice to meet you. We'll be meeting again tomorrow night, and occasionally my cat will jump onto my lap or yell. So
Cool. Where are you based out of?
I'm actually in Mount Tamborine, up in the Gold Coast hinterland.
Oh,
up in
cool.
Queensland.
Oh my god, I'm
Awesome.
like 10 minutes away from you.
You're kidding? Where are you?
Oxenford.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, Brit, you have the live class.
You can run, but you can't hide. That's great. That's cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's very windy up here at the moment. So sometimes we get glitches with the internet if we have a lot of storm activity. We get power lines going down and stuff like that. So you'd be familiar
cool.
with that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'll be out tomorrow, but I should be joining you for the rest of the trimester. So I'm
Awesome.
looking forward
to it.
to. Yeah.
And literally,
Cool.
Tane, what will happen if this is more of an admin thing? But if that happens,
Yeah.
you've probably just got to do a Zoom recording to yourself and just post it.
That's what I thought I would do. Just email everybody and say, hey, look, a tree fell on the house. These things happen. Do a recording for you.
Honestly, something that happens all the time.
True. You know the truth of this. So, but whatever happens, there'll be a workaround and we'll get the information to you. And it's a nice small cohort and everyone seems really friendly. So I'm really, really looking forward to it.
That's cool. Now, is there any questions that I need to make sure get recorded, or because I don't like to make the recordings too long because they're just a nightmare to upload?
I have one, maybe.
Go on then.
I know it's kind of like out of your hands about the whole Canvas thing, but I just want to kind of know when, if it'll be up and running.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's not your fault at all. I'm just a little cross with all of that as far as I'm concerned, it should be there. You're not getting what you paid for. It's rubbish, and it's not. Yeah, it should happen. You should be in your classes, and I was told that you were going to be in the classes from Friday. I was hoping it would be earlier because you needed to have access to all of the CG Spectrum stuff. So I spoke to CG Spectrum, who were completely onto it. So you've got access to all of the CG Spectrum stuff through Litmus. And I will, so show of hands, is anyone in Canvas or able to get access to the classes through Canvas, or are you all being locked out or not into classes?
I'm just checking now.
I can actually check myself because I can go in there and see how many people are in it. And see a list.
I still have my classes from last trimester, but nothing new.
I've just got the most current online orientation.
Okay.
Needs to be updated.
I will write a curried email after class to
Curried.
our
Spicy.
Can we get a cheeky discount on our fees?
You would.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a bargainer.
Tight
All
ass.
the material's still there from last units too, though. If you click on courses, they're still there. But
Mine isn't from last term. I've got nothing. It just says I'm not enrolled at all. It's a good time. I'm just here for the fun of it, guys. I just like hanging out, really.
This has been my whole
Who are
day.
you?
Every time a student emails me and says they haven't got something, I've just been writing an email off to student services. They'd be so sick of me just filling up their inbox with.
I can so imagine you sitting there, so grumpy, writing an email, stabbing the keyboard.
No, the worst would be he's got a template already and he's just going to add the name in, fill in the blank.
Control paste.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not even that organised. I'm just forwarding it on, just going. There we go. There's another one. There's another one. There's another one. It's bad. At least you guys had a relatively smooth experience last trimester. So this trimester's been really bumpy to start. So it's It's not good. But we will hopefully have a smooth, everything will be smooth tomorrow, I hope. But anyway, this is honestly, Tone, we're not this disorganized.
These things happen.
I might just stop the recording, then we can really really have a go. No, all right. If there's any questions regarding that anyone might want to see in the recording?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So in regards to our practical units in
Yeah.
the animation and modeling, how should we go about submitting our assignments in terms of like Box or Canvas?
We're going to pursue with Box at this stage because it's just easier, because that seems to be working really smoothly, because you've got all your recordings in there, you can throw your files in there, and it seemed to be really pretty smooth for your mentors, because your mentors don't ever go into Canvas, and I just want to keep it smooth and simple for them. My aim and my goal was that Canvas was going to be your only place you'd ever need to be, but unfortunately we haven't got to that point yet.
Yeah, because Box for the weekly tasks are pretty good, but in terms of like the assignments, because if you don't submit it to Canvas, then it will actually show up like missing or not submitted.
Do you know
So
the only person
should
that
we go
sees that
about?
is me and Tony?
What's that, sorry?
It's just when they go into Box, when they go into their assignments in Canvas,
Yeah.
because the CG Spectrum subjects, they throw them into this thing called Box. It's exactly like Dropbox. It's just got a directory structure, and it's got weeks, and they throw all the stuff in there. It's like there's no submission for those subjects, and I think Leon's sort of worried that it looks bad, but in actual fact, the only person that ever sees that is me. Does that make
Cool.
sense?
That's good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, honestly, don't worry about it. I know what's happening in the background.
What about when it says late? Because some of them say missing, some of them say late because they were actually late, but that's because I had extension.
Yeah, literally, the only person that ever goes in there and sees that is me.
Alright.
And the only other way around it is I need to go and get the e-learning person to go and officially give you an extension, so it doesn't show up as late.
Yeah.
Don't worry, there's not a committee of people that sort of suddenly get sent emails because your stuff's in late. It's literally only us, and I get these little flags by your name, and I don't even look at it.
Oh.
Yeah. Don't stress about that stuff. If it's really bad, then we'll have a chat. But if it's so far, there's nothing to worry about. I might just stop the recording there unless anyone's got any questions that we need to get recorded. Okay, I shall stop the recording.